Carol Ann Ormes grew up in University Park, Maryland, and spent her summers near Annapolis, Maryland, at Epping Forest. She loved swimming, boating, fishing, and crabbing, of all things. She later lived in Silver Spring, Maryland, attended Montgomery College, where she studied medical technology and graduated with honors. She did her internship at the Washington Hospital Center in D.C., then worked in the clinical microbiology laboratory, where she shortly became supervisor and remained so for 38 years. For 20 years, she taught classes in clinical microbiology. Carol Ann found out about hermit crabs from a friend on the way to Bethany Beach in 1976, then adopted Jonathan Livingston Crab at Ocean City, Maryland. Shortly after, she adopted Crab Kate at an aquarium store in Virginia. They were buddies for all of their lives, spent little time in their tank, and loved racing around in her apartment. Upon retirement, Carol Ann acquired a computer and began assisting in the running of the Crab Street Journal, a name she suggested. At one point, she and a crab friend in Boston even took it over. What fun it was! Vanessa of Australia and crab lover Don of Alabama were her virtual crab friends. Years later, Mike Vukoder took care of Jonathan when Carol Ann had hip surgery. They remain very good friends. Carol Ann moved to Shell Point Retirement Community in Fort Myers, Florida, 17 years ago. She was elected as court representative of a large building of over 100 people in the Woodlands and continues to hold that position 12 years later. Having lost Crab Kate after 35 years together, she was blessed to have Jonathan Livingston Crab for a full 45 and a half years. He was a delight to her and to all the residents of Shell Point. Crab Kate and Jonathan received lovely burial services on the lawn by the pond behind her building. She knows they are in heaven and still says goodnight to them when she goes to bed. Please welcome Carol Ann Ormes.
Hi there, this is Carol Ann. I used to go by Carol of Crabworks. You may have known me then. I never heard of hermit crabs, but some friends and I went to the beach, and one of them had just read about them, so she told me all about them, and I thought, that's kind of an interesting thing, getting in and out of seashells and all that. So as soon as we got there, we went to a crab store, a shell store, and my friend got a hermit crab, Buster crab. And he was in and out of her suitcase all the time. And I wasn't too sure I wanted one, but we were there for quite a while, so I got used to having him, or looking at him, or playing with him. So on the way home, we went a different route. We went through Ocean City, Ocean City, Maryland. And we went in that store, and there was Jonathan Livingston Crab, just waiting for me to take him home. So I did, and Jonathan was in this little bitty shell. Can you see that? Look how tiny that is. That's what he came in. And I took him home, and then I needed to go around the Beltway to get a tank and some gravel and things like that. And there was Crab Kate. And she came in this shell, just a little bit bigger. You see that? Quite a difference, I would say, than from recent years when Jonathan was in this shell. Quite a difference. But this was 45 and a half years later. So I got very attached to them. Crab Kate was the boss. She'd push him around. She'd climb up on a tree where he was sitting, his driftwood tree, and peel his feet off so he would fall down and she could have the top spot. And they just were all over my apartment. I had a sunken living room then, and they didn't know they could go up the steps, so they just had a good time. And then I moved down here to Florida to a retirement community called Shell Point. And I had to get these crabs down here with me, and boy, I tell you, it was not easy because Amtrak said we'll throw them off if we find them. They wouldn't bring them down. None of the airlines until we finally got Delta. Delta had hermit crabs on their list, so I was convinced that I had to have them inspected by a veterinarian first. That's a riot. I don't think they'd know anything, but the chief veterinarian in Tallahassee wrote me a letter and said, have them checked by a veterinarian and then you're good to go. You may take them to Florida. So I cut off the top line of his letter that said I had to see a vet, and I took them with me. And a friend went with me. It was her mission to get those crabs down here. So we took them there, and I had them in a little tank with a canvas bag. Checked in when I was there, and the guy whispered to me, why didn't you just keep them in your pocket? He was the inspector. I didn't want them x-rayed, or I didn't want them to find out I had these crabs and say no. So I paid their $74, and my ticket was $105, and down we came. And got to stay at a hotel for a while, and some friends of mine picked us up, and they just couldn't wait to see those two crabs running all around on that bed. They just had a wonderful time. So I was there for a few days till I got here in my apartment at a place called Parkwood. And it's taken, as I said, 45 and a half years for Jonathan to get this big. Crab Kate died when she was 35 of unknown causes. And but I kept him for so long, the oldest living hermit crab race in captivity in the world. Isn't that an interesting thing to be known by? So he ran through my apartment back and forth out on the lanai, climbing on everything. He had a wonderful time. If I were eating in the dining room, he'd come in there and eat something from a little dish. So he was a busy guy, and I took him out on the walkway here. We have a big open atrium, and I'd let him walk up and down there and stay with him and go visit my neighbors. And so those were some of my beginning days with Jonathan Livingston Crab and Crab Kate. I'll show you at least one other little crab I had. See this little tiny thing? Crabby Hayes. Somebody talked me into getting him, I think, in North Carolina or someplace. She said, who's going to take him if you don't? So I did, and he lived for about 2 years and died of unknown reasons. But I just wanted to tell you how I chose the name Jonathan Livingston Crab. In 1970, this book came out, and it was so popular that it was even on the cover of Time magazine. Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Everybody read this book. And I was so excited for some reason about this name that's how Jonathan Livingston Crab got his name. I hope we don't get sued, but so far we haven't. So that's where the name came from. And there was Crab Kate. A girl in my lab told me that would be a good name for a crab, Crab Kate. She ended up naming her daughter Kate even. One time I lined up of all the shells from 1976 to 1985 that Jonathan and Kate had been in, and they're right there in the front. And they're 3 little shells that little Crabby Hayes had before he went on to another world. But it was just fun to keep track. And if I'd done that since then, I would have a zillion shells, so I'd never get a picture of them all. This is a picture of me I was with my friend who now lives here at Shell Point, and my two crabs, as you can see there, were probably maybe 15 years old. And we were just down at the beach having a good time. You see this picture? This is Dustin the cat. Dustin was my friend's cat, and I took care of him for a while, but I didn't let him see the hermit crabs. However, he was asleep on my bed one morning, and I put the crab on the bed, and this is the first second he opened his eyes and saw this crab. Then he reached out for him, and I jumped across the room, and I think I lost that picture, but he didn't hurt him. Dustin the cat. You might want to know how I knew when Jonathan and Kate needed to molt, because this was all a learning game for me. But I would see them starting to dig down in their gravel in their tank and dig. And I guess I learned somehow that this was the time, and I would put them in another plastic tub in the dark, in the den, wrapped in a blanket, because they have to be in the dark, and I put a heater in that room, and a piece of slate right up on top of that tank, and they would burrow down and find a place to stay. They'd come out many times, but then they'd finally settle down and proceed with the molting process, which took many weeks. The older they got, the longer it took. Another thing that I would notice when I would look at them when they were digging is that they had what I always called snack packs right inside their bodies, and they kept water, fluids in there, so they would need that to help when they needed to get out of their old exoskeleton. So that was a clue that they needed to molt. I used to keep an eye on these crabs when they molted. I think this is Kate right here, and she had just molted, and I peeked in the molting tank. You notice it's all gravel, just to see, and she had just shed her exoskeleton that was right in front of her. So that was always a happy day. When they were molting, I used to peek underneath. I'd take the lid off that I had over top of them, and maybe I use a flashlight. You can see Kate here is just molted, and her exoskeleton is lying right in front of her. And there's a towel around here because I kept them in their tank, regular tank with a towel in those days. Things changed over the many years as to how I would do this, but that's the way I did it when they were younger. And I was always so excited when they molted to see that exoskeleton lying there right in front of them. Kate would shed that exoskeleton, and when her own exoskeleton, the brand new one, would get hard enough, then she would start eating the old exoskeleton. That's what this shows, to get back all those nutrients that she lost. And you could hear her in there just crunching away like she was eating potato chips. And I love to peek in there and see that going on. And here she is. She is working on that exoskeleton to eat it, but notice how brown her legs are. She's turned from a kind of a skin color like my fingers to a healthy brown, and she'll be ready to go soon. But she's still eating that exoskeleton. Loves it. This is a picture right here that you may be looking at when Jonathan molted, and you can see his really pink exoskeleton. He had shed the old one, which is sitting here in a pile, and look how pink he is. I mean, he's just plain pink skin. But he was molting in coconut fiber at that time, and I tried that once, but it took all the shine out of the seashell. So I never used it again. I just used a really fine gravel, and believe it or not, I had that gravel for another 45 and a half years because I bought it when they were babies. So they were just in a storage tub with a blanket around them and a heater in the room, But look how pretty and pink they are. He was when he first molted. When I put them in their tub to molt, this is one with gravel with slate on the top, and over the years I had to keep raising that. They sat on, the slate sat on yogurt jars for a while, but they were too short, so I had to move to taller glasses to hold the slate roof up and then put something on top to keep it heavy enough so he didn't keep coming out of there. But you can see he's just molted underneath there. So it was an interesting trial and error system, but it seemed like it always worked. You know, Jonathan and Kate were eaters, and they were fussy eaters. They didn't always eat what other people said their crabs ate, but they loved fresh spinach leaves and little bowls of powdered calcium. They didn't eat those other calcium things that everybody else said they gave their crabs. They didn't like that. They liked that powder. And they liked eggshells. Always boiled and gave them eggshells, and they sat there and crunched those to pieces till there was nothing left. Even when they were molting, I'd throw eggshells in there. Loved crabapple tree bark and oak leaves and other kinds of leaves and walnuts. And, you know, neighbors would give me shrimp when they had shrimp, and I would just give them the tails. They didn't like the meat. I ate the meat, they ate the crunchy tails. We shared. And for years I bought those sun-dried baby shrimp and worm castings, which was later, and green sand. I think I just told you all that. And I had rainbow rocks in the corner with 2 holes in them, and they loved to sit on those rainbow rocks. Those were their favorite places to sit. And spangum moss. Boy, they loved to sit there and chew on that, eat it up. And they have an open stump that Mike gave to them, and they loved to get in there and chew on that wood. They were fussy little rascals, but they would try almost anything. Hi again. This was a picture. I made a poster of their 21st birthday. Boy, that was a long time ago. And there they are, the 2 of them, getting bigger, sitting in front of their poster. A couple of years ago, my neighbors wanted to know all about Jonathan and Kate. And so I pinned a bunch of pictures on this board, a little crooked now, but I went down and gave a speech to tell about all these. So you know about all these from 1978 to 85, and this sweet little thing and this pink murex shell. And here we are up in the top of a tree where Kate used to pick Jonathan's feet off the top so she could have the top spot. King of the mountain. You see this? King of the mountain all the time. It even says that here. King of the mountain. And she chased him all over the living room. And look at this plant. Here he is up here in the top of this plant, hiding from her. I took care of Justin, my girlfriend's cat, one time, and he just spent his time guarding this tank. Didn't hurt him, didn't let the crabs out. And here we're tussling over some shells. Give me that shell, he says. And then I made a Christmas card one time, and it took me forever and ever to get the 2 of them to sit inside of this little sleigh. But I sent it out to everybody. Some people didn't know what I was sending. I had to tell them. And there they are, just running around, looking at new shells, trying on a shell over here to see what's right. This was a birthday, 30 years together, a birthday card. And I have a friend who was excellent in calligraphy. And she was always making him cards. He's have little beady eyes. So just peeking in, she made a little card for them. And that was their tank when they had a tree in it. And I used to pull that cover up at night to keep them warm and dark. It's been an interesting time, and I'm at the age now where crawling around on the floor looking for Jonathan underneath the furniture or Kate is just a little bit hard to do. So I'm not convinced that I should get another crab at this point, but boy, I have a lot of memories to listen, to think about, and a lot of crab friends. And my name was given out, I think, by Mary Akers, and 45, 50 cards came from all over the country from people for sympathy for my loss of Jonathan. Jonathan was in a very good molt, but taking a long time. I kept him in the den in a tub with gravel in it and slate roof on top, and he would bury down there. It was taking him quite a long time, and I looked at him with a flashlight every day. You know, they're supposed to stay in the dark, but I had to peek. And he finally had a perfect molt, shed that whole exoskeleton, and there he was sunk back in his shell, and he didn't look right, and I knew he was gone. So I don't know whether it's just old age or what, but he's in heaven now, and I miss him terribly. But he's had a wonderful burial out in the backyard by our pond, and one of my good neighbors used a big, deep hole digger and dug down, and I had him in a cellulite or whatever that is, plastic box with the moss that he loved so much, and a little heart because he died on Valentine's Day, and a little gold cross on the chain, and something written to say who he was. So he's near Kate back there. And I had the exoskeleton, which was perfect, but you know, I thought I'd probably spend the rest of my life staring at that thing, so I buried it too in another box near Jonathan. So there they are, and I walk back there and I look up in the sky, and I know he's in crab heaven, because God created him. So that's my story, and it's been an interesting one, and to all those people who sent me all those cards, and I don't know your email addresses, but I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. That was wonderful. I didn't know that I was going to get so many cards and wonderful things written and pictures drawn and photographs. And one fellow sent me 61 cents. It was just wonderful to get all those little gadgets and doodads people sent me. Thank you for that. It made a huge difference in my life. So I think that's about all I can tell you right now. And I look forward to seeing you a little bit more. And my many thanks to Tammy, who's done such a job to do this for us. I've known her for a long time. I've been to her store in Mount Dora, and she came all the way down here to Fort Myers to do this filming. So thanks. I miss you all. I remember the Crab Street Journal, which I named many years ago. Worked with Vanessa in Australia, and we just had a great time doing those things. So now I'm in charge of my big building here, and I have been for 11 years, and that takes up so much of my time. How silly that I do that, but I love it. Thanks for stopping in. Bye-bye.